Hello, and welcome to this short mini lecture about delivery in public speaking. My name is Dr. Jason Stone, and I'll be your guide for this video. I chose 4 speakers here who were all engaged in good delivery, but they were all doing something distinctly different. We have one person who's just kind of posted up in a question and answer session, and they're just very casually sitting on a stool. We have another person who's very informally describing a visual aid that they just made, a model that they just made on a dry erase board. And then we have 2 other speakers who are a little bit more formal in their delivery. We have one who knew that she was going to be lit with a spotlight and then chose to wear white as a result of the public speaking situation. Then we have another public speaker who looks like he's kind of just come out to the audience, and he's engaged in some hand gestures. He's got his hands up above the box, out of the box, as we will talk about a little bit later in this discussion. This mini lecture accompanies Chapter 12 of your textbook, the Virtual Public Speaking Project. And in Chapter 12, there's 4 types of delivery that are discussed. The first is manuscript, second is memorized, third is extemporaneous, and fourth is impromptu. This is a slide that I put together in PowerPoint, and I used the design function, the designer function, to produce a few different versions of it. Let's see what we made. First is manuscript, and this is, of course, one of the most famous manuscript speeches ever given. This is the manuscript from Theodore Roosevelt that saved his life as he was on his way to give a speech in 1912. He was shot by a would-be assassin. The assassin's bullet hit his speech and hit his eyeglass case and did not penetrate far enough into his body to kill him, and it was only a flesh wound. And this is an instance where, writing out the speech word for word literally saved a president's life. Manuscript is where you write the speech out word for word, and you deliver it as it is typed or as it is written. So manuscript, the speech is written word for word and read, and for the most part in this class you produce a full sentence outline, which is a manuscript. Next we have memorized, and I used Kenneth Branagh from a Shakespearean play, and he's talking about poor York, alas, I knew him well. Most of us did a soliloquy at some point, and that soliloquy was probably memorized. Memorized, as far as public speaking goes, can be dangerous. If you forget the words, you will have a complete breakdown, and you may or may not be able to restart, kind of depending on where you were. So that's probably the most risky of all of our potential delivery methods. Next is extemporaneous, and this is the type of speech that you want to do from limited notes, and it's rehearsed, but it's not worked out word for word. You may have parts of that feel kind of memorized, but you just have some limited notes that are available. The very last slide in this slide deck is a great example of what extemporaneous speaking outline should look like. Check out that last slide in this PowerPoint show. And then this is a great example of how these different delivery types can impact how the audience perceives you. And all this is, kind of an older piece of art. We see what your textbook refers to as a head bobber. And a head bobber is someone who has their notes and they're just kind of looking up, over the notes. Or they keep the notes and then they, do that. Okay, well, it's considered to be bad eye contact. It's considered to be bad delivery. And we see the gentleman to the right is definitely engaged in that head bobber, kind of stuck behind the lectern, boring type of delivery. And then we have the gentleman to the left who's engaged in, the grandiose elocutionary style, and they're, trying to, make an argument, and they're being very grandiose and deliberate with their hand gestures. The last type of delivery type is impromptu, and this is a speech that is created on the spot. It's improvised like jazz, kind of done in the moment. I would say elements of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech were more impromptu in their nature, and some of them were more manuscript in their nature. The part at the very beginning where he's talking about the metaphor of the check stamped insufficient funds, that is the newest part of the speech, and he wrote that out word for word. He's engaged in manuscript delivery at that point. There were many things that he had been stumping on in revival congregations for about 10 years in the South. The whole "I Have a Dream" part, the different mountaintops that he expresses as a kind of a use of proximity. All of those are things that he had done in the past and that he had delivered to audience in the past. So they may have been memorized at some point in the past. He may or may not have had a full manuscript of what he was going to say about all of that stuff in front of him. You can tell based on his delivery that he's not looking at notes and that he's speaking from the heart, and that those are things that he's familiar with when he's saying them. We also mentioned some other kind of impromptu speeches, and I just wanted to point those out. I have some of those demonstrated for you here on the slides. Of course, impromptu speaking is a collegiate public speaking activity. I was pretty good at it. It was one of my favorite ways to speak in public. And one of my favorite competitions involved, they would give you 3 fortune cookies. You read the 3 fortune cookies, you pick the one that you wanted to talk about, and then you're given 7 minutes. You might spend 30 seconds kind of preparing some anecdotes and filing some stuff and thinking about which books you wanted to talk about, and then you'd spend 6.5 minutes actually talking. This is a gentleman who's speaking at an investor meeting, and he is advocating for something. He is now being recorded by someone. So this is an impromptu speech where he didn't really have much of a plan for what he was going to say, but now the stakes are higher. Now he's being recorded, and potentially that's going to be out there for all time. So he needs to really, understand his audience. The type of impromptu speech that most of you will do is a interview for a job. And you have an impromptu speech, more or less, coming up as your final exam in this class. As our last speech is typically, oriented around performance and oriented around professional communication. And then finally, an impromptu kind of speech that many of you are frequently called on to do, and that is to give a toast at a wedding. And the one that I always like to give at a wedding is to the happy couple: may they live as long as they want and ever want as long as they live. And then I raise my glass and I have a seat. Think about what you will say if you were given a microphone at a wedding, and have a plan. You want to make sure that you're engaged in good breath work to ensure that you have good delivery. And in class, we refer to this as diaphragmatic breathing. It's the type of breathing where you breathe in, and the act of breathing in actually fills up your lungs with air, but it also fills down to your abdomen and fills up your belly with air as well. You're able to breathe from your diaphragm, and you're able to project the spoken word a long ways because you're speaking from your diaphragm. Deep breathing is really important as far as public speaking goes, and you want to make sure that you're not locking your legs, and you want to make sure that you are diaphragmatically breathing, and that you're getting more than enough oxygen to finish your speech. We've been talking about Vanessa Van Edwards and the Science of People pretty much all semester, and one really cool resource that the Science of People put out was like 50 most commonly mispronounced words. Is it GIF? Is it GIF? Is it ERO, IRO, or ERO, or Euro? Is it nuclear or nuclear? Is it mischievous or mischievous? These are all things that the URL, thescienceofpeople.com/mispronunciation gets into. One of my favorites is Worcestershire sauce. I've seen a lot of TikToks with some cooks who are reducing to absurdity the fact that they can't pronounce this word. They are now pronouncing it as wash your sister sauce, which I think is really, really funny. According to your text and according to chapter 12, mispronunciation of words is one of the number one things that you can do to decrease your credibility with a delivery-related concern. Again, we had a real good time with this one in class. We have a real regional difference of opinion as to whether or not something is a soda or a pop or a soda pop or if it's a Coke. And typically, if you come from the Southwest, it's a Coke, unless you're in this little part of Waco where they make Dr. Pepper, and then, of course, it's a Dr. Pepper. Minnesota typically refers to this as soda and not as pop. And they say it exactly, like the name of the state, too, Minnesota. not T-A, D-A. Timber, not just something you yell when you're cutting down a tree. It is the quality of your voice and how your voice sounds. And the inset bottom right graphic here is quite wonderful in this regard. Your voice can either be warm, clear, bright, punchy, soft, harsh, strident, scratchy, raspy, mellow, breathy, nasal, throaty, or grumbly. And it can sound all sorts of different ways. Warm, clear, bright, punchy, soft, harsh, strident, scratchy, raspy, mellow, breathy, throaty, nasal, or grumbly. Your voice can do a number of different things, and when you combine your vocal cords with your diaphragm and your lungs and your body mass, really what you're vibrating is not just your vocal cords, you're vibrating your whole body to produce that sound. One of the most interesting public speakers in the history of the American Republic was our 16th president, Abraham Lincoln. Old Honest Abe gave a very important address called the Gettysburg Address, and it was not very long. He only spoke for about 3 minutes. It was only like 180 words or something like that, and had some really, really cool invention and had some really cool words. It was not necessarily delivered the best. According to historical records, Abraham Lincoln had a very nasally voice. And he had kind of a high-pitched, sort of nasal, voice like this. The thing about a voice like that is on a clear morning, it can go forever. If you're adequately diaphragmatically projecting, your nasal voice can be projected a long ways. And that's kind of what he sounded like when he gave the Gettysburg Address. It's largely thought to be one of the better speeches ever delivered by a human. And he started it off with mere words: "We cannot more fully consecrate this land than the blood which has already been shed here. And we did this so that governance for, of, and by the people would not perish, but instead have a rebirth." He was sick when he said it. Like I said, the opening act spoke for about an hour and a half. He got up and he spoke for about 3 minutes. And there was some grudging, hesitant applause that started. And he turned to somebody there on the stage with him and he said, "Well, that fell on him like a wet blanket." He did not think very much of the speech when he gave it, and he didn't have a lot of confidence in the Gettysburg Address right after he was done delivering that speech. It was grabbed up by a reporter. That speech was ripped out of his hand and was sent all around the world on a telegraph. And as people read the words, they were like, "Oh, wow, this was a heck of a speech." So be aware of all the different audiences that will digest the speech and in what format. And if our 16th president, Abraham Lincoln, hadn't allowed that reporter to type out the speech and send it through the telegraph, it might not be remembered as one of the better speeches ever given. But because he was sensitive to all the different audiences at play and was sensitive to his own delivery mechanisms, it's a famous speech. This graphic very capably sort of shows the underlying scientific principles of sound waves and amplitudes and why a higher pitched voice seems to travel really well and seems to stay organized for a longer period. I am disappointed that most students these days don't know that is Ben Stein, and he was speaking in a movie called Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And he is actually talking about Theodore Roosevelt and tariffs and monopolies. And he is engaged in some really boring high school speech. And he is giving a high school history lecture. And he is one of the most monotone speakers ever. Monotone speakers speak in such a way that there's very little differentiation between one note and tonically the note that preceded it, or the word that preceded it. It's kind of tough for me to be monotone. I'm very sing-songy by nature. It's one of the reasons why I'm, somewhat pleasant to listen to. Um, Highness or lowness in your voice. Your voice is the echo of the resonance made in your vocal cords vibrating open chambers in your body. When the pitch is altered to convey meaning, we call that inflection. A speech without flexion does not vary. This speech is said to be monotone. Declarative sentences state truths. The pitch should regulate down. Interrogative sentences inquire and solicit a response. The pitch should regulate up. I read that slide for you in my best monotone, type of voice. Probably wasn't especially pleasant to listen to, and you were like, "Oh, why is Mr. Stone doing that to us?" I was trying to demonstrate monotoneity. You will find that declarative sentences pitch down, interrogative sentences pitch up. There's a wonderful video that you can watch about this from one of America's most talented poets, Mr. Taylor Mali, and it's called Totally Like Whatever. I will link the video for you in YouTube, and you can check that out at your leisure. Basically, he says that these little parenthetical you-knows are decreasing our speech effectiveness, and he does so in a really humorous and entertaining way. Of course, we learned in our discussion of credibility that speaking rate impacts perceptions of effectiveness, and that most credible speakers are thought to be between 130 and 190 in terms of how fast they're speaking. A decreased rate of under 90 tends to signal limited intelligence. We have a chart here from Ellen Gutowski from Mental Floss from the 22nd of May in 2022. How many words per minute does the average person speak? The GOAT, or the greatest of all time, according to Guinness Book of World Records, is over 600. Most auctioneers are in here over 200, not quite 300, in the 250 range. Audiobooks are at a very pleasant conversational 150 to 170. TED Talks are at that very conversational 150 to 200. Successful public speaking in that very conversational 140 to about 160 words per minute. Casual conversation 2, casual conversation 1, all a little bit better than 100 or right around 100 or right around 110 to 125. So a little bit of a difference between casual conversation and successful public speaking. Learn to take advantage of pauses and to embrace vocalized pauses. You don't have to use verbal filler words like or okay or or I mean or what's the word. You don't have to use those to hold the floor. You don't have to figure out what comes next by using verbal filler words. Instead, it's better to just have a pause. Figure out where you're at in the slide, figure out where you're at in your explanation, and pause, and then move on. Your voice needs to be a primary component of your delivery, and it should be loud enough to be projected and to be heard. It should not be received as a shout, and your voice should be projected enough so that you can decrease or increase your volume, and that you have some variability, that you have some place to go. If you're already shouting, you can't get any louder. You can only start to whisper. And if you're already whispering, you can't, really get any softer. You're already as soft as you can be. So you want to, try to maintain a spot where you've got an ability to do something with that. The last little part of chapter 12 talks about microphones and how microphones should be used and how you should be aware of if you're going to be using a microphone or not. Again, I think Etta James live from Montreux in 1975 is a great example for how you should engage in microphone work, whether you're singing, to a group of people or trying to use the microphone to give a public speech. I like to dress up when I'm lecturing to students. I never lecture in a t-shirt or jeans. I always wear a shirt with a collar and trousers or slacks. It helps me feel more dressed up. I don't put much of a filter on when I'm dressed down, and I sometimes, use curse words. Sometimes I don't make sentences that are 100% appropriate for higher ed all the time. I feel like dressing in jeans and a t-shirt encourages me to not use a filter. And I feel like dressing up in slacks and in a collared shirt helps me remember that this is a more formal form of delivery. And despite my affinity for my audience, I should remember to be more formal. And I think that non-formal sort of casual wear when you're speaking encourages you to have less of a filter. Two wonderful web resources here for you. The Science of People, which again we've talked about. That's Vanessa Van Edwards, Austin-based behavioral science think tank. And WikiHow, hand sign meanings. The WikiHow page could just be relabeled and renamed 20 ways to generate charisma using your hands. So I think that it's an excellent resource. I really encourage you to click on both of those. The Science of People resource is amazing because it's going to talk about something called the box. Your textbook also talks about the box. The box is essentially this area that we're in right here, this box. We want to have, when we're speaking to a group, we want to have our hands here in the box, here in the box. And if it's a larger, kind of, sort of speaking situation, and again, I'd encourage you to frame yourself like this for the class. In the box is right here. That's your hand gestures are right here next to you. You're able to use them. You're able to use them in this fashion. And essentially in the box is right here above the waist and below the chest. And right here is the box. If you're out of the box, that's an out of the box. If you're up here, that's out of the box. Okay. Science of People encourages you to keep your hand gestures here inside the box. This next slide has a couple of notes about speaking stance. We call the one in the top left the Forrest Gump. It is where you have your heels wider than your hips or wider than your shoulders, and it decreases perceptions of credibility. We have this next person engaged in kind of this classic sort of grabbing of the arm. And the translation for that is, I have no confidence in what I'm saying. I need to make a barrier between myself and the audience. And instead of being here in the box with my hand gestures, I'm creating this barrier and I am petting myself. I'm comforting myself. I'm engaged in a self-comforting gesture. At the top right, we have a person who is engaged in a little bit of what we call can-can kicking. And that is where you take one of your feet and you cross it over the other foot. And you are supermodeling if you are creating this thinning, sort of image where you're kind of off to the side and you don't have your feet shoulder width apart. Can-can kicking can be everything from what these ladies are doing down here in the bottom right, where they're actually kind of kicking up their heels, to just a real subtle kind of clicking of your heels together as you speak. But all of those things are can-can kicking, and they're just ways to dissipate nervous energy as you interact with your slides and interact with the audience. According to the author of chapter 12 of our textbook, Capisci, in 2024, we should strive for eye contact with the audience between 80 and 90% of the time. And we have a couple of different patterns that are discussed in the textbook. First is the head bobber. Again, that's a person who has some notes. They have the notes in front of their face, and they will put the notes down and kind of talk and then bring them up. You see that a lot with people who are behind lecterns. We have the balcony gazer, and the balcony gazer is talking to all of the people who are up here in the balcony and ignoring all of the people who are down here close to them. The opposite of that would be the obsessor. The obsessor is just going to talk to 2 or 3 friendly faces and smile a lot at those friendly faces, and then kind of ignore the rest of the audience. These last couple of slides are just some general recommendations from the end of your chapter. You want to make sure that you understand the seating. You want to make sure that you know about the lighting. In particular, will there be natural light? Will there be a spotlight? You want to make sure that you understand how your audio and visual aids will be played. Maybe they have the ability to show to show a visual aid, but they don't have any speakers. So if you play a video, there won't be any sound. So you can't have an audio aid, but there's not a visual aid. And then you need to understand if there's going to be a podium or if you're going to be allowed to adjust the temperature. Will there be a microphone that you're expected to use? If you are expected to use the microphone, are they going to be broadcasting you to another site, at that same time? Are there going to be other audiences that you need to be aware of? And then finally, your textbook refers to it as water rules. How long are you going to be in the room? Are you going to be afforded bathroom breaks? Will you be the person who's expected to call the bathroom breaks for the group? Do you want to have, water? All of those things are important to take into consideration. As you speak, you could potentially become dehydrated, and you're going to want to be able to have some water. Conversely, if you're only speaking for 5 minutes or a minute and a half or something like that, it seems kind of silly to take a water bottle, up there. If you're only going to be up there for 90 seconds, it just becomes something to potentially forget. Last two slides, preparation, practice, and delivery. You want to produce your outline in advance, and that's going to afford you the opportunity to practice with it several times. You can practice in the car or on the phone or in front of your roommates, or you can practice in front of the mirror and record it on the phone. From a physical preparation standpoint, we've studied glossophobia, and I encourage you to get back into those lessons and to learn more about that as you try to decrease your anxiety the night before. Finally, our last slide talks a little bit about how we translate that full sentence manuscript textual sort of outline into a speaking outline or into some speaking notes. And you will see here, I think some of the genius is in not only just the main points, but also in how little is written for the conclusion and the introduction. We have enough information to kind of keep you on track and to make sure that you're moving in the right direction, but everything's not written out word for word. You should write everything out word for word in your full sentence outline, and then you should practice your speech until you know what it is that you need to put on your speaking outline so that you can deliver it, making that 80 to 90% of eye contact and making sure that you still get all of the different parts of the speech included. So hopefully your 4x6 speaking notes or your keyword outline looks something like that. Appreciate your time. Thank you for your attention as we discussed delivery. And I know that if you will learn these delivery lessons and apply them to your public speeches, that the audiences will perceive that you have a tremendous amount of charisma and that you are well prepared and that you are a speaker who delivers information in a way that makes it worth listening to. And in the end, all of these prescriptions about delivery are designed for exactly that. It's just designed to help you as a speaker become a speaker that is more pleasant to listen to, that audiences want to pay attention to. I hope that you got something out of this video. I hope that you found a way to perhaps improve your delivery. Take care of yourself and have a great day.